May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to thee, O Lord our God. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Now entering into the mission field. How many of us have exited through that door in the parish hall last year? How many of us have paid attention to the sign Father Allen has painted above that door? And what exactly does that sign mean? And how does it pertain to today's lessons? Good questions. And I hope that I can answer them in my sermon today. At least, that is my intended goal. Let us briefly start with today's second lesson from Thessalonians. Paul writes to remind them that they know not when the Lord will come. Just as Father Allen did last week in the gospel lesson of the parable of the virgins and the lamps. 2,000 years later, we are still waiting. As a matter of fact, last week, coming back from convention, I noticed that at Harvest Time Temple, the sign out front read something like, Jesus is coming soon. Like I said, we are still waiting. Paul goes on to say, he, meaning Jesus, will surprise us like a thief in the night, and warns us to keep awake and be sober, and put on the breastplate of faith and love, and a helmet for the hope of salvation. For God has destined us for obtaining salvation through Jesus Christ. Here Paul reminds us that we are to encourage one another and build each other up. Yes, we do that as we enter into the mission field, as we walk through that door. That all sounds so easy. Paul has given us instructions. But then we hear the gospel parable. Let me ask you, do you know exactly what a talent is? These verses are opening to what is known as the parable of the talents. A talent, just so you know, is a measure of money. And comparatively speaking, it was no small sum of money. One talent could be compared to $400,000 in today's dollars. This parable talks about the master going away and giving his first servant 5 talents, and the second one 2 talents, and the third one just 1 talent. The first 2 invested their talents and made money for their masters. And when he returned, the first 2 invested their talents and made money for their master for when he returned. The third one buried his talent so it would be safe, much like hiding a candle under a bushel barrel, where, of course, it would not be seen. So, who was the master happy with when he returned? Of course, he was pleased with the first 2 servants, who used their talents wisely and invested and made money for him. The servant who buried his talent, not so much. He threw him into the darkness where he wept and was forever unhappy. So, who is his master? He is Jesus, and we are his servants. And again, I can refer to the door out in the parish hall, because as we enter into the mission field, as we exit that door, we are to use our talents. Not those in the biblical sense, but those as defined as a natural aptitude or skill, a special ability that allows someone to do something well. And as I look around this church, I can see a multitude of people who have special talents that they can use as they exit or enter through that door. We have people who can make beautiful banquets as we come together in celebrations of life or other church get-togethers. We have people who have exceptional talent at caring for things that break or need repair when around the church. We have people who have exceptional talents at caring for animals, or know what to do when animals have problems, or when people have problems handling their animals. And we have people who can take care of things outside of the church. The talented people with green thumbs who keep plants alive from year to year. I could go on and on, for every single one of us sitting in this here has a special talent, and when the Master comes, he will recognize that we have been using them for him, and not burying them or hiding them away. And Father Allen emphasized that last week when he talked about the sermon, and he ended his sermon last week talking about all of the people here in the church. I would like to close my sermon with a story I found online about using one's talents. It is called The Ballerina, and it was contributed to a sermon site by John Gulick on October 22nd, 2015. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed reading it. It starts out with, "Let me tell you a story." It is a modification of a story I wrote a few years ago. And I simply want to draw out that each person invested what God had invested in them. It is called The Ballerina. Once upon a time, there was an orphan ballerina, and how she loved to dance. She was the most elegant of the dancers in the whole village. But the sadness was she had no shoes. She had rough leather sandals that she wore as she did her daily chores. But by night, she would tiptoe out on the grass and dance elegantly under the stars in the clearing by the woods where she lived. One day, an old cobbler was making his way home through the woods, near where the ballerina lived. Quite by accident, and some would say it was more by a higher design, he came upon the clearing at the very time the ballerina was dancing. The old cobbler had once lived in Moscow and had been to the ballet and enjoyed some of the world's best. But when he came to the clearing, he stood entranced. Bathed in the setting sun and unnoticed, he stood and watched the ballerina in her peasant's clothes dance across the stage of grass and clover. Never in his whole life had the cobbler seen such a natural grace and elegance. His heart leapt for joy at the beauty, expression, innocence, and sheer wonderment of the dance. When the ballerina at last had finished her dance, to her mind only viewed by the woodland creatures, and only accompanied by the symphony of darting, singing birds, she bowed to them, expecting only the gentle breeze to offer its silent applause. Imagine her surprise when she heard the applause of the calloused, wrinkled hands of the old cobbler. "Bravo! Bravo!" he shouted, his wrinkled face smiling the warmest, most loving smile that the ballerina had ever seen. She tiptoed over to the cobbler, bowed to him, her face smiling, inquiring just as to who he was. "Why, I am the cobbler. I mend shoes, make shoes, fix heels, restore sandals so that they are like new. That is my art," said the cobbler. "But you, young lady, have a far greater art. I have seen the greatest dance, but compared to you, they are like clumsy cobblers plodding through the forest. You must dance in the great ballets of the world. You have a talent far greater than the best the world has seen." The ballerina blushed. "Why, thank you, kind sir. I was taught what little I know by my grandmother, who, even as we talk, has soup warming for my dinner. Will you not join us? The cobbler agreed, and over tea there was much happy talk with the ballerina woodsman's grandfather and her kind old grandmother. They talked mostly, though, of the ballerina's great talent. The cobbler told them of the great ballets he had seen in Moscow, and how the ballerina was better than any he had seen. He told them how he knew Stravinsky, the great master of the ballet in Moscow. He produced a piece of paper and wrote a letter of introduction for the ballerina to the great master. And then after the family had retired, the old cobbler worked all night by the light of the flickering oil lantern. As the sun broke into the clearing that morning, the old cobbler lay as asleep, sprawled across the kitchen table. At some stage in the night, he had sadly slipped from life into death. But even though he had died, there was an expression of contentment on the cobbler's face. For on the table lay the most beautiful pair of dancing shoes you had ever seen. Were they blue or were they silver? You couldn't really tell. For as the sunlight streamed through the window, light seemed to dance around the shoes and swirl around the endless displays of beauty. The ballerina tiptoed into the kitchen. She took in the picture of the cobbler and the shoes and the dancing light. From her pocket, she took out the letter of the cobbler's Moscow friend and read again the invitation to dance. May we all go in peace to use our talents and to live and serve the Lord as we exit through the door to our mission field. Amen.
Amen.